Okay, we're going to be studying Pesachim 93, three main topics. First, if a person who is far performed Pesach anyway, we saw Machloket, Rav Sheshet, and Rav Nahman. We'll see sources, proofs for each one. Then we'll talk about Karet for Pesach Sheni. In other words, you didn't do Pesach Rishon, and then if you did also neglected to perform Pesach Sheni, is there Karet for that? And the third topic will be how far is considered far so that you don't have to do Pesach Rishon. Okay, regarding the second, I'd like to add something to yesterday. I explained the Mishnah and the Gemara according to Rashi yesterday. But Sam actually asked a good question. What is the Peshat of the Mishnah? Because if you read it the way we did yesterday, the last clause is very difficult. It talks about Tamen derech rechoka. If you don't do it, you can perform Pesach Sheni. Shogeg or ones, also you could do Pesach Sheni. So what's the difference between them? Since either way, you can still do Pesach Sheni. So the answer is, She'elu piturim karet velu chayabin behi karet. Well, now which one, if you're talking about Karet of Pesach Rishon, which is how we interpreted it yesterday, that's how Rashi interprets it, then, none of these people should get Karet for missing out on Pesach Rishon. Either they had a good excuse, or they were honest or shogeg. And so that's what the Gemara has to add in. Oh, he's also chayav. They stick in a mezid. They stick in a mezid. So that's difficult to explain as the Peshat of the Mishnah. Harambam has a different explanation. According to Rambam, the karet that is talking about is karet for Pesach Sheni. So in other words, if the tameh or derech rechoka, since they had a good excuse mandated in the Torah for not doing Pesach Rishon, if they then do not perform Pesach Sheni, they should. If they don't get karet. However, shogeg or ones, and they didn't do Pesach Rishon, then they really need to do Pesach Sheni. They don't have that special excuse mentioned in the Torah. If they neglect to do Pesach Sheni on purpose, then those two do get karet. So that's the difference between the first and the second. This karet is talking about Pesach Sheni, not Pesach Rishon. So that's how Rambam explains it. The difficulty with Rambam is that it doesn't say anything about Pesach Sheni here, the karet part, right? I mean, you should have kind of clarified that. But the truth is today, you'll see in the Gemara on this stuff that it does discuss in detail karet for Pesach Sheni. So therefore, it is a possible explanation of the Mishnah. Okay, the paradox is that shogeg and ones should be more chamur than tamen derech rechoka. But Rambam, I think, could defend himself saying the pasuk specifically says if you're tahor and you're close by and you still don't do Pesach Rishon and you don't do Pesach Sheni, then karet. So that therefore the shogeg and ones could actually be more stringent than tamen derech rechoka, where the Torah specifies that they have an exemption. At least for Pesach Rishon. Okay, so that's I think that is helpful. And now we're going to go back to Rav Sheshet and Rav Nahman. If you remember, Rav Nahman said that if you're far away, you don't have to do Pesach Rishon. But let's say you want to anyway, and you send a messenger and say, "Hey, can you do shechita for me? I'm far away," and they do shechita for me, and then you show up later and you eat it later at night. Rav Nahman says, Hursa, it's acceptable. Rav Sheshet said, no. So first, Rav Sheshet cites a proof. Amar Rav Sheshet, Mina Amina La, how do I know my decision? The Tanya, Rabbi Akiva Omer, Ne'emar Tamev, Ne'emar B'derech Rechoka. Since the pasuk regarding Pesach Sheni mentions these two categories, that means they should be similar. We're going to see, actually, everyone agrees that they should be similar. But, what's the status of both? Just like someone who is tameh, who technically has the means to do Pesach Rishon. He could send someone to do it for him. He's right there. He's in Jerusalem. And yet he may not do it. So too, derech rechoka, who even if he has the possibility physically to send someone for him and show up later, nevertheless, it's not good. The Torah says both of these categories may not perform Korban Pesach even through someone else. That's the proof of Rav Sheshet based on the Rabbi Akiva. But Rav Nahman amar lach, how would Rav Nahman respond to that? Rabbi Akiba leta'ameh says you're following Rabbi Akiba. I don't have to agree with Rabbi Akiba because what did he say? The kasabat en shochatin v'zorekin al temeh sheretz. You're assuming that someone who's tameh may not send someone to do Korban Pesach. I don't agree to that. Rabbi Akiva says that. So someone who became tameh sheretz and they didn't go to the mikveh yet, can they send someone to do Korban Pesach? Then they'll go to the mikveh after the Pesach is performed, and then they'll eat at night. Rabbi Akiva said no. So that's why Rav Sheshet could quote him as being the same as derech rechoka. Now, Rav Nahman says, I think one can. Someone who's tameh sheretz in the morning, he can ask someone else, can you do Korban Pesach for me? Then after it's du shechitan zerika, he goes to the mikveh before nightfall, and then he eats it, and he thinks it's fine. So too, derech rechoka, he can send someone, I'm going to show up later at night just to eat it, and that's fine also. So you see, both agree that the tameh and derech rechoka are the same. Rav Nahman thinks that both of them can do, even though they don't have to. They can push it off to Pesach Sheni, but they can do Pesach Rishon if they want. Rav Sheshet says no, neither can do it. All right, now next we have a proof for Rav Nahman. Tanu Rabbanan, Elu she'osim et hasheni. The following may perform Pesach Sheni. They're exempt from Pesach Rishon. Hazabin v'hazavot. So male and female zab, right, who have a abnormal emission. Misora'in, misora'ot, male and female lepers. Nidot. Nidot. Any woman, that's interesting, any woman who's nida cannot do Pesach Rishon, which means, times of the Bet HaMikdash, that would be, a third or so of women wouldn't be able to do it. This is interesting because that means they would have to do Pesach Sheni. However, Pesach Sheni would be the same time of the month, so they probably wouldn't be able to do that one either. Ba'alei nidot, the man who sleeps with a nida is prohibited. Besides being prohibited, also the man becomes tameh. Behayoladot, someone who had a child, recently gave birth to a child, she is also tameh for 7 days, 14 days. Hashogigin v'anusin v'hamizidin, if you did it by a mistake or out of one's control or on purpose, they did not do Pesach Rishon. Also, v'tameh, that's referring to tameh met, v'she'er b'derech rechoka, someone who's far away. All these people may do Pesach Sheni. Now, Yudil said basically every possibility. So why does the Torah bother to specify tameh when there's all every other possibility also? Tameh meaning tameh met, but any other kind of tumah. So why does the Torah specify that? Okay, the yellow is the Gemara interjects an answer. So it's a little confusing. It interjects the discussion. So I just want to read the Baraita as it was. So why does it say tameh? Lefotero min hakaret. So the Torah specifies tameh specifically. Well, Torah specifies derech rechoka also. So maybe the Baraita means to include both. So why specify those? To say that these two, one would not receive karet. Now, not receive karet for what? For the first one or for the second one. So based on the Rambam that we read, it would mean the second one. If they didn't do tameh derech rechoka, if they didn't do the first, because they don't have to, the Torah says you don't have to. And then if they purposely didn't do the second, they still would not get karet. Whereas all the other ones would, right? That's how Rambam would explain this baraita. Okay. In any case, now the Gemara interjects and says, "What do you mean? Lama ne'emar? Why is the baraita asking? Why does it say tameh? We have a ready answer. To teach that if they wanted to do the first one, we do not let someone who's tameh. They cannot do the first one. Oh, so what? No, really, what it's asking is why does the Torah specify derech rechoka? Answer is so that they will be patur from karet. Notice that the Baraita does not answer that if they wanted to do the first, we don't let them. See, that would be Rav Sheshet. Since the Baraita does not say that, that's a proof for Rav Nahman. Uchman damar hursa. That's Rav Nahman who says you can perform Pesach Rishon if they wanted. So that's the proof. Since the Baraita quotes the reason why it mentions tameh, it really should be tameh also, because we just learned that according to Rav Nahman, either tameh or derech rechoka If they want, they don't have to perform Pesach Rishon, but if they want to, they can. And so, since the Baraita does not give that answer, that the Torah specifies those to teach you that they can't do it, in which case it would be a proof of Rav Sheshet. Instead, it gives a different answer, Karet, that proves that the Baraita follows Rav Nahman, that in fact these two categories may perform Pesach Rishon if they want. Okay, so that's the proof for Rav Nahman. Now that you mentioned these, the women here, and it says all these women who are tameh, they can do Pesach Sheni. Hold on, now we go back to the woman's obligation to Pesach for Pesach Sheni. Isha b'Sheni memechayeva v'hatanya. Or do these women, or women in general, chayav in Pesach Sheni? We have another braita that says Yachol lo yehu osin et hasheni ela temeh nefesh v'shaya b'derech rechoka zavinu mesora'in u'bo'aleh nidot minayin tamod omar ish ish. The Gemara asks, right? The Gemara asks, I might have thought maybe only someone impure, only and derech rechoka can do Pesach Sheni, as the Torah said, right? Can it be that only tameh met and not all these other men? Notice how it only mentions men, right? Tameh nefesh, right? We know that derech rechoka. But how about the others? All these are men. Tamud omar ish ish. Therefore, it says every single man to include all of these. So you see from the wording in this baraita that is only including men, that they could do Pesach Sheni, not women. So how come the baraita up here mentioned that all nidot and zavot and mesaraot, they can also do it? La kashya, had to be Yosef, had to be Yehuda, had to be Shimon. Oh, it must be that the first baraita was to be Yosef. Remember back a couple of dapim ago, Rabbi Yosef said that women may perform Pesach Sheni, whereas Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon said they do not join in and may not do Pesach Sheni. So their second baraita is following Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. Okay, so that explains the contradiction. All right, so that finishes that topic. And now the next topic is Karet for Pesach Sheni. We're going to have three different opinions. Tenor Banan, Chayav Karet al Harishon, Vechayav Karet al Sheni Dibrei Rabbi. So if someone is either or, if they neglected to do Pesach Rishon, they get Karet. If they neglect to do Pesach Sheni, they also get Karet. He doesn't seem to think that you would get Karet twice. You can only get like max one. But no, if you neglected either one, in other words, if you didn't do Pesach Rishon on purpose, let's say, you get Karet. Even if you perform Pesach Sheni, right? And if you didn't do Pesach Rishon for a good reason, fine, you wouldn't get Karet for that. But then you don't do Karet for you don't do Pesach Sheni, you would get Karet for that. So you get for either or. Rabbi Natan omer chayav Karet al Harishon upatur al Sheni. One would only get Karet for Pesach Rishon and not for neglecting Pesach Sheni. Rabbi Chananya ben Akabya omer af al Harishon eno chayav Karet elam ken lo asa et hasheni. So he says that as long as you do one or the other, you wouldn't get karet. In other words, if a person didn't do Pesach Rishon, we hold off on any karet. If they do Pesach Sheni, then that will fix his the fact that he didn't do Pesach Rishon. So as long as you do one or the other, that's fine. Whereas Binatan says karet is on the first one and has nothing to do with the second. Okay, we're going to see the differences between each of them. V'azdula ta'amaihu. The Tanya ger shenitgayer ben shene pesachim v'ken katan sheigdil ben shene pesachim. Let's say someone converted after Pesach Rishon but before Pesach Sheni, or someone became bar mitzvah after the first and before the second. So that person never had an obligation to do Pesach Rishon. So now Pesach Sheni is a makeup. Yeah, but you only do a makeup if you had to do the first one, right? So do you have to do the second one? Chayav lasot Pesach Sheni divrei Rabbi. So the Rabbi considers it as two separate obligations. And even if you never were obligated to do the first, you still need to do the second. And if that person doesn't do the second, they get karet for not doing the second. Rabbi Natan omer kol shezakuk larishon zakuk lasheni. The second opinion, Rabbi Natan says, only if you were obligated in the first, then you're obligated in the second. Kol she'en zakuk larishon, en zakuk lasheni. So he would say the kid that got bar mitzvah on right and end of Nisan, he doesn't have to do Pesach Sheni because he never had to do the first. So what's the essence of their machloket? Sheni regel bifnei asmohu. Pesach Sheni is its own holiday, and so it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you didn't do Rishon, you still have to do Sheni, even if you were not Jewish at the time. Rabbi Natan Sabar Sheni tashlumin de Rishon hu takunei la Rishon la matkin le. Rabbi Natan says it's a tashlumin. It's a makeup for the second one, for the first one. So if you were not obligated to the first, then you don't have to do the second. But he doesn't think it's a repair. What does repair mean? Well, that's the third opinion. Rabbi Chanina ben Akabya or Sabad Sheni takanta de Rishon hu. That it actually can repair a failure to do the first one, which means that the korban brought on the second is not an independent obligation, but a chance to avoid karet, which means, according to the Bichanei, is even more mekel. Even if a person purposely didn't do the first, but does the second, he's out. He's okay, right? He can fix what he did before. Rabbi Natan says he can't fix what he did before. If you didn't do the first one and you didn't have a good excuse, you get karet. Then the second one will be tashlumin, but it doesn't undo the karet. So both Rabbi Natan and Rabbi Chanina agree that you only do the second if you had to do the first. What they disagree is if karet follows the first independently, or if the second one, if it's delayed, and the second one you can undo the mistake that you did in the first. It's a tikkun, not a tashlumin. So that's the three opinions. Now we're going to bring the sources for each of the opinions. All three derive it from the same pasuk. Asher hu tahor b'derech rechokas. This pasuk, asher hu tahor b'derech lo haya. So in other words, if the person was tahor and he was not far away, he was close by, so he had no excuse, and he still didn't do the Pesach v'nichleta nefeshahi me'ameha. Good. That's pretty clear. That now what they argue is on the next word, ki. What does the word ki mean, right? Ki can mean a lot. It can have a lot of different explanations. Ki korban Adonai lo hikrib b'mo'ado chet o yisa ha'ishahu. So because he didn't sacrifice the korban, the Pesach, at the right time, chet o yisa, he will bear the burden of his sin. So is this talking about another punishment in addition to the karet, or is it referring to the same thing, just in different language? That's going to be the machloket between them. So Rabbi Sabad, Hadal la'asot Pesach v'nichreta de la'abad Pesach Rishon. The first half of the pasuk is talking about Pesach Rishon, that's karet. The second half of the pasuk says, and if he also didn't do the second one, lo hikrib, then chet o yisa. Chet o yisa is another reference to a karet. Now, mimai hai chet o yisa karetu. Wait, how does he know? It just says he will bear his sin. Who said that bear sin means karet? Kasavar megadef hainu mebarech Hashem, uchti mebarech Hashem benasa cheto. He's going to learn it from somewhere else. Regarding someone says ish ki kalil Elohav. So someone who the Gemara says blesses God, because we don't want to. It's a euphemism. We don't want to say, right. So mibarechet Hashem. Okay, so someone who is yikalel elokav. So that person says nasacheto. That's the same language as the second half of the pasuk and karet. And in megadef, asher et Adonai hu megadef nichreta nefesh mekereb ama. There's two explanations. So what is megadef? Some say it means that one gives praise to idolatry. That's the next opinion. Rabbi, however, thinks that megadef means the same as, right, as mebarech et Hashem, the same as this pasuk, yikalel Elohav. Therefore, since the pasuk in Bimidbar here it says karet specifically, and it's the same sin as this one, so therefore, yikalel Elohav is also karet. The word nasachet means karet. Therefore, the word nasachet in the pasuk over here also means karet. And since the second half of the pasuk is referring to Pesach Sheni, so there you go. That's another liability of karet. So if either he neglected the first or the second, according to the B, one gets karet. Vegamar hay cheto dehacha mehai He learns the word cheto regarding karet, regarding Pesach, from the word regarding mevarechet Hashem. Karet afkan me karet. Okay, so that's how the B explains the pasuk. Rabbi Natan sabar. וחדל לעשות הפסח ונכרתה, דהי כי לשון דההו. He thinks the word, he also learns it from the second half of the pasuk, but he thinks that the word ki means because, and he means it as follows: Deha korban Hashem lo hikri b'moado barishon. Why does he get karet? So we could read it here. Right, person who was close by and he was tahor, and he doesn't do Pesach Rishon, he gets karet because he didn't do it at the right time. Therefore, chet'o yisa. So, in that in other words, he gets karet for Pesach Rishon, independent of Pesach Sheni. Even if he makes it up, it doesn't help because he missed the first one. So, hay chet'o yisa, my abed le. Okay, according to him, this word chet'o yisa, right? Doesn't he have to agree that that's a second punishment, right? Another karet? No, he doesn't think so. Kasabar. Megadef lav hainu mebarechet Hashem. He thinks that the pasuk up here, Megadef, is talking about praising idolatry. It's not the same as mevarech et Hashem. So that karet, leave out. We don't forget this pasuk at all. It's not relevant to us. All we have is this pasuk, ki ish ke kalel Elohav v'nasach chet'o. And so now the question is, what is nasach chet'o? We don't know what it is. Well, we'll actually learn it from Pesach. כסבר, לא היינו מברכת השם, וגמר היי חטא דהתם, מהי חטא דהך, מהך כרת, אף התם כרת. In our pasuk regarding Pesach Sheni, since it says in the first half of the pasuk karet, and the second half of the pasuk says chet'o yisa, so chet'o yisa is referring to the same karet as the first half of the pasuk. It's not a second punishment. Based on our pasuk, we know chet'o yisa means karet, and our pasuk is actually the source for mekalel Elohav, that also is karet. But I can use it that way because it's not this chet'o yisa is not its own independent sin. According to the B, it's an independent sin, and we don't know what it is. That's why we need megadef to come teach us both of them. But in this scenario, we don't need it because it's referring to the same thing as the first half of the pasuk. All right, that's Rabbi Natan. Rabbi Chananya ben Akabya Sabar, v'chadal lasot haPesach v'nichreta, korban Hashem lo hikri b'moado b'sheni. He learns the word ki as if, the word meaning if. So the person who did not do Pesach Rishon gets karet if and only if he does not do the korban Hashem at the right time, meaning in Pesach Sheni. So his neglect to do Pesach Rishon, we will not get punished yet unless he also neglects to do Pesach Sheni. Just one or the other will help him out. What does he do with the words chet'o yisa? Not the same as what Rabbi Natan did. It's not an independent punishment. It's the same punishment as the first half of the pasuk. Okay, good. So that's now how we learn all of them. Now we'll show the practical differences between them. So that according to everyone, if someone purposely did not do Pesach Rishon, and on purpose he doesn't do Pesach Sheni, he purposely sins for both, everyone would agree that that person is chayav karet. Shagag bazeh dibra kol patur. If he by mistake he forgot the date, he forgot Pesach Rishon, he forgot Pesach Sheni too, and by mistake he missed both, everyone would agree patur. He wouldn't get karet. You don't get karet if you do something on purpose. The interesting cases are one or the other. Hezid barishon v'shagag b'sheni. On purpose, he missed out the first, but then he really meant to make up on Pesach Sheni, but he just forgot the date. L'Rabbi or Rabbi Natan mehayeve. According to the B, for sure he's chayav no matter what. According to Rabbi Natan, he's chayav on the first, independent of the second. Rabbi Chananya ben Akabya patur. According to Rabbi Chananya, he's patur because it's true he didn't do the first, but he doesn't get punishment because he can still do the second. The second, he meant to do it, but he didn't get a chance. So therefore, he's patur from both. Shagag barishon ve'ezid b'sheni l'Rabbi chayav. If he by mistake missed the first one, but then on the second one, even though he had a chance to make it up, he says, no, I'm purposely not going to do it. The B says that the second one's an independent holiday. and so he gets karet just for the second. According to the others, since the first one he was shogeg, so the second one is only a makeup or a fix of the first one. So therefore, it doesn't matter. One does not get karet independently for the second. All right, that was very interesting. We're thinking of every possible logical outcome. And now we get to the next Mishnah. Ezohi derech rechoka. How far do you need to be considered far and exempt from Pesach Rishon? Min hamodi'im velachos uchmidata lechol ruach divrei Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says from modi'im. This is what modi'im, we call it modi'in. We know some people that live there. So it's from there, from Jerusalem to there. That's the edge, and the same radius all around. So anywhere within this circle, we expect you to be in Yerushalayim and do Pesach Rishon. If you live outside, then you're not obligated. The Torah is not going to trouble a person so much that they have to travel. It's nice if they do, but they're considered derech rechoka. That's the stringent opinion. Rabbi Eliezer Omer me'iskupat ha'azara velachutz. Very surprising. He says actually from the Temple Mount and outside is considered, right, for the threshold of the temple courtyard and beyond is outside. So the threshold is a fence that goes around. If you're in that on Pesach on 14th in the afternoon, then you have to do Pesach Sheni. Then you have to do Pesach Rishon. If you're outside, right? If you're like, even where just on the Temple Mount outside or out in Jerusalem, you don't have to do it. That's called derech rechoka. Okay, that's quite surprising because basically that's everyone, right? It's very easy to push off to Pesach Sheni. Amar Rabbi Yosef, lefichach nakud al he lomar lo mipnei sherachok vadai. Rabbi Yosef is backing up Rabbi Eliezer. Maybe he realizes that we're surprised at this explanation, but he says this is why there's a nikuda on the he. If you look in the Sefer Torah, and here's a copy on the word rechoka, there's a nikuda on the he. There's 10 places in the Torah, words in the Torah that have nikudot on them. And these nikudot, what does this nikudot mean? And there's an ancient scribal practice that, let's say you find this in the Dead Sea Scrolls. If you write a word and you realize it's a mistake, so they didn't have whiteout back then, so they put dots on top, and that shows it's a neat way of saying this word doesn't belong. Okay, that was a widespread scribal practice. So in the Torah, it doesn't mean exactly that, but it does mean that there's something suspicious about this word. You have to limit the impact of the word in some way. So like when Esav hugs Yaakov, right, and kisses him, there's letters on that. So that's a hint to, he kissed him, but he didn't really kiss him. He didn't really mean it, right? So it's an interpretive hint to limit the word. So here, since we have a letter, a dot on top of, it's true on top of the letter, but it might be just erase that letter, or maybe erase the whole word, or read it as if it's not there. So if it's tameh nefesh o baderech, if someone is on the way, it doesn't have to be rechoka. And so by removing rechoka or reading as if it's not there, so that would explain it'd be Eliezer's opinion, because you're not far away, but you're not there. So if you're not there, you're also patur. All right, that's really fascinating. That's the Mishnah in the Gemara. Amar Ola. Min hamodi'im v'Yerushalayim 15 milin havya. How far is it exactly from Jerusalem to Modi'im? It's 15 mil. Mil is 1,000 steps or double steps. It's about a kilometer. It might actually come from the same thing. Kilo is 1,000. Mil is also like millimeter is also 1,000. Definitely comes from Latin. And so, right, 1,000 double steps. About 3,000 something, 500 feet or so. So that's how far it is. Sabar la ki had amar Rabba bar Hana amar Rabbi Yochanan kama mehalech adam bayom. Now we can calculate it as follows. How far can an average person walk in a day? Asara parsaot, 10 parsangs. That's a Persian word, which is 40 mil. So, and it breaks down as follows. From dawn to sunrise, a person can walk 5 mil. At the end of the day, from a sunset until nightfall, also 5. So you got 5 in the beginning and the day, and 5 all the way at the end of the day. So that's 10. So it's 40 altogether. So pashulehu tilatin, there's 30 left over in the middle of the day. Split them in half. So 15 meal from sunrise until midday. And another 15 from midday till sunset. Okay, it's a little imbalanced because it seems that from dawn to sunrise is an hour or so, and yet you're doing 5 meal there, but in the 6 hours later you're only doing 15. Okay, I guess you may be taking a break for lunch. In any case, ula leta'ameh damar ula ezehu derech rechoka kol shen yachol likanes b'shat shechita. Ula, you see, is actually very consistent because he also says, what do you call derech rechoka? Anytime you cannot get to Jerusalem by the time of shechita, assuming that you leave after noon. Since the obligation to do shechita begins at noon, that's the earliest possible time you can do it. So the Torah is not expecting you to go get a plane ticket, a cruise from 2 months before and get there. The obligation begins at noon. That's when you actually need to stand up and start walking to Jerusalem to do it. If you can get to Jerusalem in time within that 6-hour window from noon till sunset, then you definitely have to go. But even if you leave at noon, you won't get there, then that's called derech rechoka. And so how far is that? Well, that's how far can one walk from noon till sunset? 15 mil. There you go. So that actually fits. Modi'im is 15 mil away. Now we understand why that city specifically is because it fits with Ula's general theory. Amar mor me'alot hashachar ad netzach hama chameshet milin. Okay, now you just mentioned that we can walk 5 mil before sunset. Minalan, what's the source for that? Dichtib kimo shachar ala vayayisu malachim, when the angels wanted to come and take Lot out of Sodom, so they went to him kimo shachar, meaning at dawn, and they said, "Come on, we got to get going. The city is going to be destroyed." And then, they got him out, and when the sun rose, that Lot and his family were in So'ar. So they made the journey from Sodom to So'ar between Alot HaShachar and Netz HaChama. Says, I went there, I tried it out, I walked it, I measured it, and in fact it is 5 mil from Sodom to So'ar. So that's the source that we know that a person can walk 5 mil from dawn till sunrise. Excellent. Gufa. Okay, now that we mentioned Ola, we're going to quote the full context and see that actually there's a machloket in this regard. Amar Ola, so Ola says that you're considered far away if it would be impossible for you to get to Jerusalem in time to do shechita, meaning you have to get there before sunset. But Rabbi Yehuda Amar Kol she'en yachol likanes b'shat achila. He's much more. He gives a much bigger distance. That if you cannot get there in time to eat it, then you're far away. Well, how long is that? You can eat it all night. Well, one opinion says till midnight. One opinion says the whole night. So therefore, that would be much farther away, even if you live several more miles away. Or at least a little bit more away, you have another 6 or maybe even 12 hours. So it'd be like 30 or 45 mil that a person, if they were that far away, would still need to go, and they have to do Pesach Rishon. So actually, Rav Yehuda is more machmir. Good. Amar le Rabba le'ola. Rabba has a question, a challenge to Ola. Ledidach kashya ul Rav Yehuda kashya. I have a challenge to both of you. What's the challenge? Ledidach kashya damart kol she'en yachol likanes b'shat shechita v'hat temesheretz te'en yachol likanes b'shat shechita v'kamar shohatin v'zorekin al temesheretz. He says, Ula, I have a challenge. You seem to contradict yourself. On the one hand, you call someone who's far away is defined as someone who cannot make it not make it to Jerusalem before the time of Shechita. So in other words, you think that someone has to be in Jerusalem during time of Shechita. He has to be present for Shechita in order to do Korban Pesach. And yet, you say regarding Tameh Shedet, someone who became impure, he touched the dead rat in the morning and didn't go to the mikveh yet. And he can still send someone else to do the Korban before him. So even though he cannot do Shechita himself, it doesn't matter. He can have someone else do Shechita and Zirikah for him. So therefore, it's only important that he be available at night during the time of eating, not during the time of Shechita. So that's a contradiction. On the one hand, you said he has to be available during time of Shechita in terms of the distance, and then you say he doesn't have to be fit during the time of Shechita. That's a contradiction to you. For Rabbi Yehuda, it's the opposite contradiction. It's still a contradiction because he has the opposite view on both in both contexts. Rabbi Yehuda kashya damar kol she'en yachol likanes b'shat achila. So Rabbi Yehuda says, if you're far enough away that you cannot be there during the time of eating, so that means that he doesn't care. You don't have to be there during the time of Shechita. That's okay. You can send someone else during Shechita as long as you're there to eat it. So Shechita is not important for him to be there. And then Rav Yehuda says someone who was tameh tumat sheretz, and didn't go to the mikveh yet, it's okay. That person cannot send someone to do Korban Pesach, meaning he has to be fit for Korban Pesach at the time of Shechita. And so that's a contradiction because here you said that he doesn't have to be there in terms of distance, but he does have to be there in terms of Tumah. So that was to deal with both of these contradictions. Amar le, Ula says, I can answer both of them. La ledidi kasha vela Rav Yehuda kasha. Ledidi la kasha derech rechoka la tahor. Ben derech rechoka la tameh. It's not a problem for me. When it says derech rechoka, being far away, that's someone who's far away and is tahor. That person needs to be there for the time of Shechita, right? Because he's tahor. But that does not apply to tameh. Someone who's tameh can do the korban, right? These are two different categories, and so there's no need to compare them. Rav Yehuda lakasha tameh sheretz rachamana dahye tichtib ish ki yeh tameh la nefesh. Okay, regarding tameh sheretz, Rav Yehuda says the Torah specifically excluded that person because anyone who is tameh la nefesh, and this person is tameh. So even though, he could send someone, but he's excluded, he's out, he does not need to do it. Maybe even he can't do it. Mila askinan shachal shvi shelo liot be'erev Shabbat be'erev Pesach v'afilu achi marachamana lidche. The Torah was talking about someone that's tameh nefesh, tameh from corpse impurity. And we saw before an opinion that said that it's referring to a case of someone who, that was his last day. He was corpse impure, but this is the seventh day, because he says, we can't eat it today, which implies they could eat it tomorrow. And yet, in that case, when those people came to Moshe Rabbeinu and said, can we do it? He says, no, you don't do it today, you do it next time. Even though, technically, they could become purified and do it at night. So you see, since it specifically excludes them, that case is equivalent to Tameh Sheretz, who also could go to the mikveh and be available at night, but they don't have to. So since that Torah specifically excludes them, that's why. But other cases, like someone who is far away, according to Rav Yehuda, they don't have to be there during the time of Shechita. As long as they can make it to Jerusalem for the time of eating, they are obligated to perform Pesach Rishon. Baruch Adonai L'olam, amen v'amen.